Tomorrow may be remembered, for a while at least, as Oliver North Day in America. At 9 a.m. Eastern Time, the fired White House aide will speak publicly for the first time about the Iran-Contra affair. There has been a steady whetting of appetite for what he has to say by the testimony of others about him. Judy Woodruff has been among those listening very carefully.
Oliver North didn't reveal anything about himself the last time he appeared before a congressional committee.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully and regretfully decline to answer the question based on my constitutional rights.
And Colonel North hasn't revealed much since. Aside from comments he's thrown out to reporters from time to time, we've had to rely on others to describe Oliver North.
He's Ollie this and he's Ollie that. Get him out of here, the brute. But he's the savior of his country when the guns begin to shoot. Thank you for your service, Colonel North.
When the Marines invaded Grenada, it was Colonel North who planned the attack. When the president ordered the bombing of Libya, it was North who directed it. When the Achille Lauro was hijacked, it was North who helped plan the capture of the hijacker. And when the United States attempted a blockade of Nicaragua, it was North who directed the mining of the harbor.
Whenever there was a crisis, Colonel North was the man that usually handled it.
Well, I thought surely that Ollie was probably the most mission-oriented, can-do professional on the staff.
I made the comment, I think, to General Secord that I've seen Colonel North's before, and there's something to behold.
But what's behind the medals of service and underneath the leather skin? Who is Ollie North?
Tell us just a little bit about him. What was he like to work with? What kind of a man was he? Give us as much as you can.
Ollie North was an anathema and an enigma.
He began his usual days. Monday through Fridays began 7:30 in the morning with a staff meeting. And the day started off a crack of fire from that point on until he left. I don't think he ever left the office before 9 or 10, and usually sometimes he would stay till 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning.
I've seen him work almost without sleep for weeks at a time.
He works around the clock, doesn't care about when he eats or he does eat or doesn't eat.
He very seldom went to lunch, and only if it was a working lunch. I don't say that you shouldn't read the newspaper, but Colonel North didn't even have the time to read the newspaper, usually.
What do you guys think? This morning says you tried to shred documents. Your secretary, Miss Fawn Hall, said you tried to shred documents.
The Washington Post said that? Oh, good for them.
Do you have any reaction to that?
No, it may come as a shock to you guys, but I do not wait up all night for the sickening thud of the newspaper to hit my driveway.
Over the course of the hearings, we have heard that Colonel North is a religious man.
I think Colonel North is a man of immense devotion to the preservation of human life. Now, that sounds like a platitude, but it isn't at all. He's a person of very deep and profound conviction, belief in God.
I am going to church, but that's something different.
We have heard that Colonel North is a family man.
He never forgot that he had a family at home.
I believe it was his youngest daughter's birthday, and she called him 3 times, at 7 o'clock, at 8 o'clock, and at 9 o'clock, and in essence said, "Daddy, when are you coming home?" And Ollie said, "Don't worry, honey, Daddy's coming home as soon as he can. I've just got to finish this work." By the time he got home, his daughter was already asleep, but he was willing to take the time to get the job done.
I had heard through various remarks that Ollie was not spending time at home and he was not attending to his family, to his kids' education and so forth, and I had come emotionally very attached to Ollie, still am, and really love this man.
I can only add that I love Ollie North like a brother.
He was probably every secretary's dream of a boss.
We've heard what people would do for Oliver North.
I talked to Richard, General Secord, that I said that I thought it would be wise to set aside $500,000 to cover as a death benefit for Ali.
I told him that I had some basic ideas how to protect the family, that I was extremely conscious that this was a family, this was a home. Here was someone that I had only met slightly, but I thought was an extremely dedicated, intense man, dedicated not only to the country, but to his family. And I must admit, his family impressed me greatly. I thought Mrs. North was a lovely lady and greatly devoted to her family.
Well, I think it's clear that you're not the only person to fall under the spell of
Yes,
Colonel North. We have Albert Hakim, as a matter of fact,
Yes,
who spent a very brief time with Colonel North, and yet he also felt a sincere obligation to protect his family, not in a security sense, but in a financial sense.
We have all of these instances of people trying to do wonderful things for people and just never telling them about it, and this is another example.
But even though some considered Oliver North an excellent Marine, a good boss, and a loving father, he does have his critics.
How do you feel about being called a renegade in the White House?
I don't work there anymore.
When you were working there, people said you were a renegade.
When I worked there, nobody said that.
There was a widespread impression of him as a kind of loose cannon, and it was perhaps in that context also that it was that I was being told to keep track of what he was doing.
The interpretation of guidance I had given him would probably be certainly carried out, but that probably he would on occasion go beyond, and I could foresee that.
It's said North is capable of exaggerating.
I met Colonel North out in our office, and he said at that time, he said, this has been a success. You'll never get a medal for this, but someday the president will shake your hand and thank you.
The voting was taking place.
A congressional debate was going on and it was being shown on TV, right?
And he looked at the TV and said, those people want me, but they cannot touch me because the old man loved my ass.
It has become clear that North doesn't always win friends.
Sometimes he stepped on toes. As a matter of fact, I think it was Senator Cohen who called him the first five-star lieutenant colonel.
I'm asking whether you felt betrayed by him.
At times.
But those who say they know Oliver North say they've never doubted his motives, love of his country and support of the Contras.
He believed deeply in this president and this president's programs. He believed in the Contra cause.
Ali is a man that is a veteran of an experience in Vietnam, of which I was very conscious. And I think for him, when it became a matter of association with the Contra movement, that it was, again, a circumstance where we had made a commitment to people that he could see we were just about to break, and that the bottom line consequence of that would be the death of a lot of people, Contras, and that he couldn't be party to that.
I sized Colonel North to be a soldier that, as if he always searches for a way of getting killed for his country. That comes across so vividly that, you cannot remain insensitive to it. The man, it is an obsession with him. He likes to get killed for his country. He doesn't care.
I am just grateful that I had an opportunity to serve President Reagan, and I'm grateful that I'm still a serving officer and continue to serve President Reagan as my commander-in-chief. Have a good day.
Tomorrow, just how well North served the president will come under intense scrutiny. Committee members and counsel will ask a lot of questions, like, who, if anyone, authorized the private aid network North set up for the Contras? Did the president know about the diversion of Iranian funds to the Contras? Did North benefit personally from the proceeds of the arms sales? What was North's role in misleading the Justice Department and Congress last fall? And finally, why did North alter and shred documents critical to the Iran-Contra investigation.
I believe when he comes before you and he's allowed to tell the American people his side of the story, that he will do it honestly.
Let me ask you this. Would you believe him under oath?
Congressman, I would not, but I personally don't believe an oath in any way enhances the obligation of truthfulness.
And in effect, you're saying you would not believe him, whether he's under oath or not.
Well, I have to regretfully say that. Yes, sir, I have to say that.
2 House members and 2 senators have been designated by the committees to lead the questioning of North tomorrow after committee counsels have had their go at him. The 2 designated hitter senators are with us now from the Senate gallery. They are Senator Paul Tribble, Republican of Virginia, and Senator George Mitchell, Democrat of Maine. Senator Mitchell, are you expecting to hear the truth from Oliver North beginning tomorrow?
I don't think there's any way we can make that judgment yet. We on the committee have not had much opportunity to question him, really just a few minutes, and he pretty much read from a prepared statement last week. There's substantial evidence that's been presented to the committee that raises questions about his credibility and his judgment. Certainly the testimony of Mr. Cooper was very persuasive. We just saw it on the screen. He's a very high-ranking Justice Department official. So I think we have to view his testimony with caution, but give him a chance to make his case. I don't think we can tell yet whether we can believe him or not.
Senator Tribble, what's your view of it, particularly based on his brief appearance, even though it was brief, his appearance before you all in private session last week?
Jim, I think Oliver North would tell the truth when he appears before the American people and takes the oath. Be mindful, though, that we don't have to accept his testimony standing alone. We can weigh and measure everything he says against the testimony of hundreds of other witnesses and tens of thousands of documents. So I think we will be in a position to ask the probing questions and demand the honest answers that are essential to finding out the truth about what went on.
But how do you go about demanding an honest answer beyond putting the man down in front of a table and asking him to raise his right hand and answer questions?
Well, I guess the key here is that his testimony will not be taken in a vacuum. We know so much. We haven't put all the pieces of this puzzle together, and obviously Oliver North is an essential part of that total picture. He was the man who made things happen from Iran to Central America. But again, we know so much today that I believe that we'll be able to ask the right questions and ensure that his statement, his testimony, his recollection of events is accurate enough for us to put this picture together.
Senator Mitchell, what's the central question that you think that Oliver North needs to answer?
Well, I think there are several questions. Obviously, who knew about and authorized, if anyone, the diversion of funds to the Contras?
All right, what's the state of your knowledge as we speak now about that question?
Well, Senator Tribble and I were present last Wednesday evening when Colonel North testified briefly on that subject with respect to the President's knowledge of that. But we're not at liberty to discuss that. There are many other questions as well. Obviously, who knew of and authorized the actions with respect to the secret resupply network for the Contras? Was there a concerted, deliberate effort to avoid the law, that is, that portion of the law which prohibited direct military assistance or indirect military assistance as well to the Contras for a period of time? There are a large number of questions to be asked. No one of them, I think, is exclusive to the others.
Jim, if I could just add a word.
Yes, sir.
You know, I think a central question is, who is this man, Oliver North? What makes him tick? What drives him? We know he's a man driven by ideology, by love of country. But what about the false statements, the cover-up, the huge profits that we've heard so much about? We will have to pursue that as well in order to really find out who this man is and learn more about his activities.
Senator Tribble, is it crucial to resolve this question of whether or not he was in fact a loose cannon? That's been the speculation up to this point. Do you believe he was, based on what you've heard thus far?
Well, I think we'll learn tomorrow and in subsequent days whether he had authority for many of his activities. I think it's clear, though, that this is a man driven to action, a man who saw a charge and who pursued it with all of his vigor. And I think he went too far. And I think in the process he let down his commander-in-chief and obviously caused grave problems for the country.
I think,
yes, Senator.
If I could just say that Colonel North's testimony is obviously very important. It's aroused great anticipation. But we have to remember that Admiral Poindexter will still testify, and he's a very important witness. He was Colonel North's superior. He was the person with much more regular and direct access to the President. And while we ought to focus on Colonel North's testimony, we ought not to focus on it to the exclusion of other important testimony that will follow him, most notably that of Admiral Poindexter.
Yeah. The gentleman, beginning with you, Senator Tribble, let me make sure I understand what the procedure is going to be. The council, the House council and the Senate council are going to begin the questioning, as I understand it, and they will probably go, what, 2 days? Is that right?
Jim, I think so. We'll start with John Niels of the House, and he'll take the better part of a day, perhaps a day and then some. And then we'll follow with Arthur Lyman, the counsel on the Senate side. He'll take a day. So I suspect it will not be before Thursday at the earliest that George and I and our colleagues on the committee will have a chance to ask questions of the witness.
Senator Mitchell, how have you gone about preparing to question this most important witness?
Well, the same as all of the other witnesses that we've questioned, except since his participation was much more extensive and the documentation is more extensive, it's taken a little bit more time. I spent about 12 hours yesterday reading documents, reviewing prior testimony. Earlier today, Senator Tribble and I met with the Senate counsel and our assistants, and I've spent also a part of today reading other documents, and will do so tonight. And then, of course, the most important part will be to pay attention in the next 2 days with respect to the questions and answers. You've covered Congress for a long time, and so you know that one of the things noticeably lacking in many congressional hearings is members of Congress listening to what witnesses actually say. I think this is one time without prior testimony that we'll have to listen very carefully.
Have you all, Senator Tribble, have you all worked out a scenario that, okay, Senator Mitchell, you take care of that particular part of this puzzle, I'll take care of this, Congressman Cheney, Congressman Jenkins, who are the two House members, have you divided it up and for concentration purposes?
Well, I wish we could be that precise. Certainly in an ideal world, that's what we do to make sure that our questions would complement each other. But in truth, we're going to have to respond to what goes on before us. And there's no way of predicting precisely what questions will be asked by counsel, but more importantly, precisely what Oliver North will say.
Yeah. Senator Mitchell, is it your feeling, based on any kind of all the things that you have heard and supposed up to this point, is it your feeling that Oliver North is going to emerge from this as the American hero that President Reagan and others have depicted him as?
Well, I think it will be very difficult for him. The evidence that's been presented is very strong. Mr. Cooper's statement was very powerful, persuasive to, I believe, many members of the committee. And remember, Colonel North's principal concern, as his counsel has expressed repeatedly to us, is the proceedings with the independent counsel. The real history in this matter may well be written by Judge Walsh and not by these committees. And so this is
Now, why is that?
Well, he's got to make some very important and fundamental decisions as to the type of case he brings, who he includes in it, and what ultimately will emerge there, I think, could be just as significant as in these committee proceedings.
You mean simply put, whether or not Oliver North goes to jail is much more important than what he may tell you or Senator Tribble or anybody else on television?
Well, I think that's more important to Oliver North. I don't know that's more important to other people, but it's not just Colonel North. Judge Walsh has indicated that he is contemplating a major conspiracy case that would involve a lot of people. We don't know how many or under what circumstances. Were such a case to be brought, it would involve, I think, a very lengthy litigation, involve a lot of people, and could have some historic implications. So while these hearings are important, they are by no means the only process involved, and could ultimately, we don't know obviously, be secondary in nature.
Jim,
you agree with that, Senator? Yes, Senator.
We have been listening now to testimony for several months, and I haven't heard of any heroes or seen any heroes. It's just a very sad story, and I think it demonstrates what happens when you take public policy private, when you try to avoid the Congress of the American people. There are no checks and balances.
All right.
There's no oversight, and as a consequence, people and policy get in big trouble. And we've seen that here.
All right. Senator Tribble, Senator Mitchell, thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.